It's neither. There's no single moment in my life, no single incident in my life that influenced me more to become a black metal musician than when I heard Slayer's Show No Mercy for the first time. That was the point. That was the change right there, where a shadow cast itself over my mentality, my thoughts, my entire existence. It sounds silly to say it now, but when you're a child discovering this music, as I was, it has an influence on you that can't be, it shouldn't be minimalized. It's potentially destructive, and thankfully I chose the outlet of music to handle these potentially destructive thoughts, because I believe every man, especially every adolescent, has this seed of aggression within him. Perhaps it's the testosterone or something, but we need an outlet for this. Some people take the wrong route and make bad decisions that influence the rest of their life. I did, but thankfully I always had music to as an outlet for these potentially destructive thoughts. So that's part of why Oscuros exists, not because of the fights I got into in life or anything like that. Dark Throne is probably one of the most important bands in the history of black metal. So out of tribute to them, I chose to do a song, Under a Funeral Moon. These other bands you speak of don't really have much to do with black metal. They come from probably a blues, soul tradition, like most classic rock does. And we see heavy metal, black metal in particular, as something separate from that. And Dark Throne effectively enacted their own genre with that first album, Blaze in the Northern Sky, and then Under a Funeral Moon was probably really the culmination of the entire ideology probably encompassed on that album, the ideology of black metal. So out of respect to them is why I covered their song. Well, there was definitely a time in my youth where I pretty much adhered to that whole ideal of long hair, spikes, and the traditional heavy metal image. But it's probably when I became very involved in the live circuit where one of my bands wanted me to use leather pants on stage. And that was kind of the drawing line where I could no longer differentiate how I look in everyday life and how I look on stage or how I present my music. That was where I decided I would no longer put on this costume, so to speak. I'd rather just embellish what I consider my style and make that part of my perception of black metal, my presentation of black metal, a more personal presentation. And if it doesn't fit into the tradition, then so be it. I'll create my own tradition. My uniform is pretty much influenced by street uniform, Southern California street uniform, which is mostly work clothes, cleaned up, creased up, shoes shined. So some people call it a gangster uniform. I have always seen it more as a militant uniform. Not that I've ever been in the military, but there's aspects of the military that I admire. And that's just part of the whole ethos, the whole ideal of Oscuros. Probably has more to do with the skinhead ideology than I even initially realized. Comes from a same working class background, and that's how I choose to present myself in my music. But really, clothes and personal image is the last thing that music, especially black metal, should be about. It's just that when I am visible to the world, I don't differentiate my street clothes or my street uniform to the stage uniform. Even though Oscuros doesn't even perform live. But anyway, if you don't like it, look somewhere else. I don't expect my child to be into Oscuros or black metal or anything like that. If there's any legacy that I hope to leave with this music for him, is that he see the potential for creativity, for his own imagination, that he could channel his thoughts into an art form as I have. And it's probable that he will become a musician because he already has that little influence within him. Growing up with me, I'm always playing music, always on my instruments, and here he comes wanting to pound on my keyboard or my drums or whatever. So I suppose in some ways it is my legacy to him, but this music wasn't formed with that purpose. This is more for myself, for my expression, for my ideology, but in time he will form his own, and I have to respect that. I don't harbor any resentment towards any of these bands that are successful with black metal. There's some things I don't agree with very much, some things that I would do differently, but black metal has been corrupted from very early on. This is nothing new for certain musicians to take it in a more commercial route or whatever. If there's anything I've learned growing up is I have no power over people, places, or things. Everybody's free to act however the fuck they want. And that's not gonna change me. Just because somebody's doing a certain thing, I already have my own thing going. I already have my own approach to music, my own approach to thinking, acting, being, and I, it's independent of whatever else is going on in music or around me or whatever. So this has no influence on me whatsoever. Yes, it can be aggravating, it can be a little annoying, but I've always been on my own, away from the crowd anyway. So it's just the way it's gonna be. I've always maintained that Oscuros is an experimental black metal band. I think part of the reason why there's been such a drastic stylistic change over the years and such an infrequent output of releases is simply due to my involvement in other bands. As soon as I put out the first demo, I reformed one of my old bands, and you know, that made me a better musician, but I kind of lost focus of what the original vision of Oscuros was. I don't think it's ever been captured as well as it has on that first demo, which was entitled Death Threats, which are the songs The Reaper's Curse, Grim Desolate Void, and Necro Come. That's just the best presentation. All of the elements were there, all of the circumstances for myself, right down to the recording equipment, the way that it was recorded, just absolutely raw and primal. I don't think I've come close to that since. Why did I end up sounding like Profanatica on one of my more recent songs? Simply because I was trying to master the drumming style of Paul Ledney, who was such a huge drumming influence on me. That backwards blast beat that I call it. For drummers, it's when you lead with the cymbal and the snare and syncopate it with a bass drum. For the longest time, it was so fucking difficult for me to get that beat down. And so I made a song that sounds kind of like Profanatica, but I envision even more of a stylistic change in the future for Oscuros. I don't see it continuing strictly as a black metal band. At this point, I'm not really influenced by black metal very much. Uh, Very much into synthesizers, as you can see here, and it's probable that I might take Oscuros in that kind of direction, kind of maybe something influenced by horror soundtracks or some type of dark atmospheric music. But then again, I might mix that with black metal. It remains to be seen at this point. What I really hope is just for Oscuros to have a very singular vision apart from any other movement in the scene or what any other band is doing. At least stay true to myself. That's the main objective here. It does seem a bit hypocritical for extreme bands or extreme musicians to behave in this manner, treating it like this big family, so to speak. I have nothing against making friends or whatnot, but I kind of see myself as apart from that whole type of behavior. Maybe I'm just not as approachable, but I don't want to be a part of that behavior. I got a lot of friends that do. I have a lot of friends in the metal scene or whatever, but I kind of just do my own thing. I always have. I grew up with no friends into metal, so that's probably a big influence on why I am the way I am. Why I choose to be a solo musician, even though I'm a part of bands that play live and active within the scene. Uh, yeah, that the whole social club activities, something I don't engage in very much, if at all. The name Oscuros translates to the dark ones, or it can translate simply to darkness. And it dates back to about 97. Uh, Really, Oscuros was intended to be a satanic street gang. In my juvenile, reckless youth, I was uh, kind of violent, kind of an aggressor, and I was having problems with some of the local gangs, some of the local hoodlums, and I decided I would form my own gang. And that's where the name Oscuros comes from. The problem was, I didn't have any friends into Satanism or black metal or that had any of the same thoughts that I did. So, uh, in time, very soon, really, I dismissed that idea and decided to continue pursuing music instead. Thankfully, that was the best decision I ever made because a lot of my friends from that time, even though we didn't see eye to eye, a lot of them aren't here anymore. They're locked up, they're dead because they didn't have this outlet. So, Oscuros exists because of these types of conditions. Uh, a hostile environment, but having the outlet to circumvent those potential aggressions and dangerous situations created into an art form, plain and simple. Why play black metal instead of funk? Uh, Seems that every type of music I create has to be aggressive in some way. Uh, I've tried my hand at playing other genres that are more acceptable to the masses. I've collaborated on a few projects that were not in my usual style, not any kind of dark music whatsoever. And I just find myself longing for that aggression, for that darkness. Um, by all accounts, I could probably find much success playing some other type of music. But like I said, I just find myself missing that element that really pushes me forward, that propels me forward, which is just this hostility in music. I always crave funk and, you know, soul music. That it's also part of my background to a certain extent, but that's music for good times, dancing, you know, cruising and all that, which is fine, but you know, I always prefer my vision to be more singular, more personal, not something accepted to the masses, much to my detriment at times, but I have to stay true to myself. So, Oscuros lives. I will never forget the first time I heard Dark Throne. I was in the car, surfing through probably about the 88.7, around that part of the FM dial, when this noise came in, and it was one of the local stations. I think it's out of Fullerton. There used to be a university radio station that would play black metal at certain times, I think on a Friday or something. And I heard this raw band. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Turns out it was a song from Panzerfaust. I forget the name. It's like the second to last song. But that primal, aggressive, raw sound was something I had never experienced in any band, especially not at that time. You know, we're talking about 1994, 95 or something. So Dark Throne was severely impactful to my approach to music, to my whole perspective on what music is supposed to be. They pretty much just broke the rules for me and established their own genre. And like I said, for that I respect them so much. And they're a huge influence on me and continue to be so, will continue to be so, I imagine. So much respect to Dark Throne. In closing, I'd like to thank you for this interview. Anybody I know who's ever supported, who's ever extended a hand in friendship or camaraderie, I thank you. Anybody I've ever met taking an interest in my music or art, I thank you. Oscuros can be found on facebook.com/oscuros13 or by email darksideoscuros@yahoo.com. I want to send my respects to all the underground maniacs all over the world, Europe, Japan, Latin America, South America, Mexico, Italia, Deutschland, everywhere in the world. Keep supporting, never let them break you. Keep maintaining your ideology, strong and firm. Thank you.
When I tell you